I remember the voice of my sister, and my sister says to me on numerous occasions, she said to me, my dear brother, I really love you dearly, but I'll never cook your recipes because I am a working woman. I've got 3 kids. I just don't have the time to cook. And I always kind of shrugged it off as like, I sell a lot of cookbooks. People do buy my books and cook from them. But I think there is this perception that it's complicated, and I really wanted to make sure that it's within. I don't think it's wholly justified, because I think within what I've published there is a lot of very simple recipes. I guess the average is not that simple. I really wanted a book that people could cook from, like my sister and others, that feel that not every time they walk into the kitchen and want to cook an Ottolenghi recipe, they have to do extensive shopping and a lot of washing up. So the idea was to simplify things, but in a true to fashion Ottolenghi way, couldn't be simple.
Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast, sponsored by Pantera Press. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading, and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
Hello and welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. My name is Greg Dobbs. Today I'm joined by chef, restaurateur and food writer Yotam Ottolenghi, talking about his new book, Simple. Yotam, welcome.
Thank you, Greg.
When I first heard that Ottolenghi was putting out a book called Simple, I looked up from my pile of dirty pots, pans and bowls, closed the door on the cupboard groaning with Middle Eastern spices, and said, yeah, right. What do you call simple?
So you're not the only one to raise an eyebrow or 2 or 3 about the Ottolenghi simple contradiction in terms. But so, like you suggest, it probably is a case of people thinking, how is he going to do simple? Because the whole essence of Ottolenghi cooking is about that complexity of flavor and layering with spices and processes.
And you often actually apologise for the number of pots and pans required in a recipe.
I have apologized on a number of occasions, but for many things, not that's I'm quite a good apologizer. But in actual fact, I think what happened was that a few years ago, the Guardian newspaper asked me to come up with a supplement for the one of the seasons, I think it was spring, with 20 easy or simple recipes. And I remember getting the brief and saying to one of my colleagues, actually, I'm not doing that. That's not Ottolenghi, that's just not my USP. And but we embraced it, and we sat down, and within 20 minutes we had like 20 brilliant ideas for things that you could do. And I remember the voice of my sister, and my sister says to me on numerous occasions, she said to me, my dear brother, I really love you dearly, but I'll never cook your recipes because I am a working woman. I've got 3 kids. I just don't have the time to cook. And I always kind of shrugged it off as like, I sell a lot of cookbooks. People do buy my books and cook from them. But I think there is this perception that it's complicated, and I really wanted to make sure that it's within. I don't think it's wholly justified, because I think within what I've published there is a lot of very simple recipes. I guess the average is not that simple. I really wanted a book that people could cook from, like my sister and others, that feel that not every time they walk into the kitchen and want to cook an Ottolenghi recipe, they have to do extensive shopping and a lot of washing up. So the idea was to simplify things, but in a true to fashion Ottolenghi way, couldn't be simple.
Your style of cooking is, by its very nature, sort of complex and layered, so it's very difficult in a way to simplify that.
It was easier than I thought it would be. So one of the things that this book is a set of ingredients at the very back.
This is the 10
ingredients. The 10 ingredients, yes. Which was excruciatingly difficult to bring it down from 150 to 10.
On that point, I just browsing, I saw at least one recipe with 11 ingredients, but I'll let that slide.
No, I didn't say that every recipe in the book will have 10 ingredients or less. Some of the recipes in the book have 10 ingredients or less, but there is 10 ingredients that I asked the users of the book to kind of sign a contract before they start using the book and go and get those 10 ingredients. Not really just I'm joking. They don't really have to get those ingredients, but it is useful if you go and buy 5 or 6 or 7 of those ingredients, because it takes you quite a long way without having to go to your local Middle Eastern grocer. And things that I've spoken about in the past, then there's not anything very new there, like things like za'atar or ground cardamom or pomegranate molasses or a good tahini or preserved lemon. And I say, well, once you've got those, or a fraction of those, you really could cook quite easily with this book and produce meals within 45 minutes to an hour. But the concept of simple, I think, is really interesting, because what we did is we took the word simple and broke it down into the 6-letter S-I-M-P-L-N-E. And each one stands for a different simple way of cooking. Because what's simple or easy for you is not necessarily what's simple or easy for me, and everybody has very different ideas of simplicity. So some people love to cook within half an hour. So that's the S, shortened time. Yep. Some people like to cook with few ingredients, so that's the I, ingredients 10 or less. The M is a make ahead. So every recipe that has an M next to it, it's a kind of recipe that if you host people, you can do all the preparation ahead of time, and when everybody arrives, you miraculously arrive with everything ready, either needing to go into the oven or tossed together. And this is one of the most useful categories for me, because when I have people over, I've got 2 young kids, I really don't want to be cooking when there's kids around and guests around. I really want to have everything ready.
That's one of the most difficult things about entertaining is, dividing your time between the kitchen and the dining room, I suppose.
So that's it. And then the P stands for pantry, and those are the kind of dishes that you cook with rice or pasta or frozen peas or a tin chickpeas or whatever it is that you're using. The L stands for lazy, and those are the kind of recipes that you don't
probably
really
accounts for most people.
Well, it's not. You can be lazy, but you don't really need to be horrible to people. You can just be in a lazy state of mind. And those are stews and roasts and things that you just put together, have cooking for a good couple of hours, then you go read a good book or watch a film and come back and your dinner is sorted. And E is easier than you think, and that again talks about the state of mind of the cook. And I think some people, when they see the word ice cream, they just move on to the next page, or bread, or confit, like a fancy French word. They go like, that's not for me, that's for chefs. And we're trying to bust that myth with the ease.
One thing that strikes me about the recipes is the way the titles almost fully explain the essential ingredients for each recipe. Was that an intentional approach?
Yeah, I think I tried to create as much clarity. So I wanted the book to deliver the promise of simplicity on so many levels, because I really did expect that people like you would not believe that I'm capable of producing a simple cookbook. So the idea is that the font is pretty big, the cover with a big lemon on it is bold and delivers a certain message, but then every recipe has a certain simple being to it, and when you open it, those are the ingredients that I need, this is the amount of time it's going to take, and I can do it, or move on to the next page and choose another recipe.
It kind of eliminates the thinking process or the thought process. Oh, yes, I have those, I can do it, or no, I don't have those.
Absolutely. And I think it took me quite a while to understand, but I think I finally got it, and that people do bring a lot of anxiety into the kitchen. So I for me, cooking should be all about pleasure, but I know that many people do bring anxiety with them, and I hear when I speak to people say, I stress and then the meal isn't quite right, and so I try to kind of eliminate or minimize the level of anxiety that is required when someone cooks my food in this book, so they can come in and really have a joyful experience as much as possible.
There's still the Ottolenghi signature ingredients. For example, you can't be without good fresh herbs. Other recipes. Herbs
and tahini and yogurt and lemon and miso. I mean, there's a bunch of things that I use a lot. And you'd find even more of those in this book than in other books, in a sense, because if you're going to do something which is slightly less complicated or doesn't take quite as long time, you kind of compensate with ingredients that have a ton of flavor in them. So if you use something like feta or yogurt or tahini or anything that has a level of fermentation going on in it, or anchovies, then you are kind of injecting your dish with a lot of flavor and saving yourself into creating that flavor as you cook. This is why the 10 ingredients that I mentioned to you are so important, because you could do very little and then add those and you get that kind of bonus flavor. Someone did the work for you and you'll get the flavor.
That's always a good way to go, getting someone else to do the work for you.
Yeah.
I have to bring my mother into this.
Where is she?
Well, she's at home, but whenever I bring vegetables like kale or even eggplant into the kitchen, I always get this very suspicious look, as if I'm trying to kill her or something. What would you say in defence of these rather defenceless vegetables? So particularly kale.
I think kale has suffered from overexposure, and I think kale is as good as spinach or chard. It's not much better than those, but we've seen we've been overindulging on kale for quite a while. And the only reason we've done that is because it was popular for a little while. But kale is great. But it is a little bit dry, so there is a recipe here for kale with asparagus, and we kind of massage the kale with oil and asparagus and lemon, and by the time it breaks down, it's really, really good.
A massage would help anyone get in a good mood, I suppose.
Exactly. That's what you just need, a good massage before you go into the kitchen. Everything would taste good. But certain ingredients are suffering from that. But I think actually I want to sing a song of praise to ingredients that are actually less fashionable than kale and eggplant and things like turnip or swede or cauliflower or celeriac, which are actually your mum would find maybe more reassuring.
They're old-fashioned vegetables, aren't they?
But the younger generation, people that use my books, or even people that don't, find maybe a bit boring and predictable. But actually, they are, for me, the kind of the new frontier, because to create something really exciting from a cauliflower maybe takes a bit more imagination. But actually, cauliflower has gone through the kale process now, and it's been very popular and trendy for a while. Those are really, really, really good ingredients. Turnip, it sounds so dull, but it's got a really nice bitterness to it, a bit like rocket or arugula, I'm not sure what you use here, is a great fancy ingredient people love it for its bitterness. Actually, you get that in turnip, and if you make a beautiful gratin with some cream and olive oil and thyme and garlic using turnip and maybe a bit of potato, you get real complexity with a vegetable that is kind of iffy for some people.
It's really about how you dress them up, I suppose.
Yeah, it's how you dress them up. I don't think there's a bad vegetable. I think there's just how you do it, what you do with it.
Well, that brings me to one of the recipes there, and you combine two of the possibly most despised vegetables on the planet. One I've mentioned before, kale, but broccoli and kale together in fried broccoli and kale with garlic, cumin and lime. How do you approach creating a recipe from such maligned vegetables?
So in my world, they're not maligned. They're very much loved. But I find that every recipe, every ingredient that I want to cook with, poses a set of challenges. And I think something like kale and like broccoli feels very green and very healthy. And you want to make sure that those aspects are balanced or moderated with other things. So one of the recipes that one of the ways to do it is to use flavored oil. So which I use in many of my recipes, and I have definitely not invented that technique, but works very well with green vegetables, where you take an oil and infuse it with a lot of other aromatics, things like hard herbs like sage or thyme or even kaffir lime leaves. And then you put some sliced garlic and fry the garlic in that oil, and then you can add something even like cinnamon and then you take it all out, and you have an oil that has absorbed a lot of those flavor. Once you put that over your broccoli or your kale or any other vegetables, you immediately give them both the fat that they need and those herbs, and then when you throw them back in, those herbs or aromatics, they're crunchy. So you get texture. So this is one technique, but like char grilling is another one where smoke comes into the picture. There's a lot of things you can do to make things that are supposedly kind of, you use a very extreme word, malign, but they're just a little bit more challenging.
Some people would say that kale deserves not to be just charred, but burnt altogether.
Yeah, well, I don't see the point of that, but I do think that kale is just a vegetable. You know, people feel very strongly about certain things. It's only a vegetable.
That's right. Yes,
You can take it or leave it.
It shouldn't be accused of such crimes, I suppose.
No.
In your list of 10 essential ingredients, one of those is harissa. Is that the new essential ingredient?
Yeah, right. Well, harissa is really, I mean, every culture, most cultures has a spice paste or a chili paste. And harissa is the chili paste of Tunisia or other parts of North Africa. And, you know, obviously you've got similar things going on in Malaysia or in Mexico and in many other countries that have a particular chili paste. And I focused on this one because it's more and more available these days, and it's got a bit of cumin, and I like a rose harissa where some rose petals are added in, so you got a bit of sweetness to balance that, or rose syrup. But essentially, it's another chili paste that works really well with food. And I think, again, like talking about shortcuts, if someone has dried chilies and then pounded them into a paste with some oil and some cumin, then they've done some of the work for you, and then you don't need to take the cumin, and you don't need to pound the chilies, and just you take a spoonful of something which is delicious, and you've just created something wonderful. I've got a recipe in this book that I really love. It's a pantry recipe. It's a pasta, but with a kind of a North African twist, and it comes with harissa, olives, capers. It's a pappardelle, so it's a wide pasta sheets, and noodles, and it's really, really nice. And you can put it together in 20 minutes, and you serve it with some yogurt, and you've got a whole multi-layered, delicious meal made out of pantry ingredients that are all full of flavor.
You also seem to take fairly simple, familiar comfort dishes, I suppose, and you apply a certain twist to them. For example, cedar chicken schnitzel. Everyone knows a schnitzel, or the gnocchi alla romana.
Yeah.
Well, that was something I'd never really thought about, a different type of gnocchi. But this one is quite interesting.
Yeah, the gnocchi. So gnocchi really is, we are familiar with potato gnocchis.
That's right.
Mostly. But gnocchi is a dumpling by definition in Italian. And there's obviously, everybody likes a potato gnocchi, and I love mixing it with other vegetables like a potato and celeriac, or potato and sweet, or turnip. They just give you a bit of more interesting flavor within the gnocchi. But one of the less known varieties of Italian dumplings is called gnocchi alla romana. And my grandmother, my dad's mother, she's from Rome. She's passed away, but she used to make these semolina dumplings, and essentially she cooked a pot of semolina with some nutmeg and milk and butter and cheese, and then set it as you set polenta, and then cut it into circles or square and arrange it on a tray, and then sprinkle some more cheese on top and put it under the grill. So it's like a semolina gnocchi gratin. It's one of the most delicious things in the world. I can't really say how good it is.
I'm salivating right now.
You just need to think about melted cheese over set semolina dumplings, and it's just the most delicious thing. And it took me a long time to recreate it, because I've always thought, like, I can't make it as good as my grandmother, and I couldn't, and I didn't. But I met a friend of mine, Ivo, who's from southern Italy, from Sicily, has taught me how to do it in a way that gets pretty close to the way my grandmother did it, and then it's so good.
And your food now actually appears in the movies, is that right? Bridget Jones's Baby recipe?
Yeah, I mean, despite my best effort, they just managed to get my name into that movie. It's a very funny story, actually. So, last year or the year before that, someone called me and said, "Do you know that your food is in Bridget Jones, the latest installment?" I said, "No, I didn't. We didn't pay for that." And apparently there's a scene in the film where Bridget Jones' boyfriend brings her a delivery from Ottolenghi to cheer her up. And in the bag of takeaway salads and sweets, there is a dish of salmon with capers and saffron and currants. And I remember someone calling me and said, "Well, that is what he brings her for the dinner, their TV dinner." I said, "That's not one of our dishes, actually. They made it up." But they did bring an Ottolenghi bag. So as soon as that has happened, I thought, I've got to go and invent that dish. So it was the first time that a scene in the film has inspired an Ottolenghi dish, and that's the salmon. And I really absolutely love it. It's a simply grilled salmon with a salsa that has capers, celery, saffron. And so we call it the Bridget Jones salmon. And
that actually happened in reverse.
It happened in reverse, yeah.
Although your food's predominantly Mediterranean, your cooking sometimes strays, if I can use that word, into the cuisine of other places like Japan or Asia in general and the subcontinent. What brings about for you that kind of borderless creativity, or are there no borders for you?
There are no borders in the sense that I would never take a meal and think it's not a good opportunity to hijack a recipe. You know, I've never eaten a meal without being inspired to create something, a good meal. And I think that's I think the instinct of every chef. That every time you put something in your mouth, it inspires a dish. That's especially myself, that I publish so many recipes on a weekly basis that I really need to be inspired all the time. But there's cuisines that I gravitate towards more naturally than others, and I always look at it as a kind of so I was born and brought up in Jerusalem, which is kind of in the heart of the Middle East, and I see it as a kind of a concentric expansion process. So I've traveled both physically and through books and magazines and people that I've met to North Africa, which was the next way of expanding, and further into Turkey, Iran, and kind of the Western Asia, and then India.
It's just
the
a
next
short
frontier.
step.
It's a short step, and then Southeast Asia, then Japan. But those steps are actually not only physically make sense; they also make sense in terms of the food philosophy of the regions. I mean, when I go, I find things that are echo the food that I've grown up. I mean, I've talked to you about chili pastes. I've grown up with Yemeni chili pastes called hug, green and red, because there were many immigrants from Yemen in Jerusalem when I was growing up. But these are not so unlike the harissa paste of Tunisia and the sambals of Malaysia. I mean, obviously there's fish sauce in Malaysia, and or there's some kind of fishy element, or ginger that you wouldn't find in the others. But essentially, those are the same thing. So my travels are not arbitrary; they're logical. They make sense. Like if I get my fix of garlic, my fix of cumin, my fix of citrus and chili, then I would go to a place and enjoy it. But you know, Japan is a whole different kettle of fish, and many chefs enjoy Japanese food and ingredients because they're just so marvelous, and you can make those connections. And we have tahini in the Middle East. Japanese also use sesame paste.
Yes.
So yeah, I do it. I don't do it randomly. I don't do this kind of extreme fusion, but I do fuse things together when they make sense in the way that I described.
Your food is so vibrant and fresh and colourful, and to me it speaks of glorious Mediterranean feasts and family banquets underneath shady fig trees. Is that the kind of environment you grew up in?
Sometimes, not so much. I mean, both my parents they worked hard, so there wasn't really a sense that it wasn't like a Tuscan villa scenario where we were outdoors the whole time. Those kind of outdoor abundant meals were actually I would be exposed to them more in Palestinian kitchens and restaurants. We would go to the West Bank or East Jerusalem and have those kind of meze feasts that are type of the Palestinian dining experience, where you sit down and you get a whole load of salads, a bit like Lebanese cooking that you get so much of here in Australia. And so this is how I was exposed to that kind of the sense of generosity of a Middle Eastern feast, and that definitely stayed in my mind. So when I think with Sami and I, subconsciously, when we create our Sami Tamimi, who's my co-author on a couple of books and partner in their business, when we create our Ottolenghi display, where there's kind of these kind of massive salad platters and foods that are clearly generous, we are inspired by the Middle Eastern either souk or market experience, or the meze experience in a restaurant.
I noticed that you also included a chapter on meal suggestions and feasts.
Yeah.
What brought you to that idea?
It's a very practical thing, but as talking about the usability of the book in general, often people are not sure how to make a meal. So they like a certain recipe, but they're not quite sure how to create a feast. And even I, as a seasoned, cook and recipe writer, when I see a recipe in a book, I always ask myself, what would that go with? And when someone does that work for you, I think it's very useful. And I've heard so many people say, "Oh, I cooked a whole meal from one of your books, and I just chose this suggestion of recipes that work together, and it's really, I just find it really useful. So there's a spring chicken. I think there's a spring chicken table where you take the chicken is at the center, and you've got all the condiments to work with. And especially in a book where the recipes are not very complicated. When you want to make a feast, again, you can cook 4 or 5 things without spending 2 days in the kitchen. So that's the idea behind those suggestions.
Now, you're also quoted, I think in 2017, in an article in The Independent, you're quoted as saying you found British food to be incomprehensible. What did you mean by that? And considering British cuisine was also transported to Australia in 1788, can you then apply that statement to Australia? Or would you apply that to Australia?
I'll start by saying that I don't remember having ever said that.
Well,
and I don't remember, but I will try to figure out what I may have meant when I said that. So I think incomprehensible, probably what stands behind that is that when at this particular point in time, when I arrived in the UK, which was in the middle of the 1990s, British cuisine was not as celebrated and as understood as it is now, and Indian cuisine was kind of incorporated into the essence of British cooking, and it hasn't had the clarity of voice as it has now. When you go to a gastropub or that serves traditional British food, you know exactly what you're going to get, and there's good examples and bad examples, like with ethnic cuisine, and I knew what it means. And I think now, and it's true about many cuisines, and I think it's also true about Israeli cooking. If you look at Israeli food 20 years ago, it was just a bunch of people cooking the foods of their original backgrounds without it becoming into one thing, as opposed to the Palestinian cooking just next door, which was a tradition that has had time to evolve over a long time. So I think I know what British cooking stands for now, and I think it's actually getting very good, and it also embraces all sorts of influences in a really interesting way. But Australian cooking, in the British sense, I've never been exposed to that, because I know it exists, I've read about it, but I've always had the most incredible fusion food that has had its inspiration from Greece or Lebanon or China or Indonesia or other places where immigrants come to Australia. So for me, Australian food is all that kind of vibrant, exciting foods of immigrants.
I think you have to go back a few decades really to find what I was talking about. But there was a time when what we ate was based on very much on the sheep's back. So we ate mutton a lot, and thankfully it's changed a lot since then. Have you ever had any really outstanding experiences with Australian cuisine, or indeed Australian produce?
Oh, I've been coming to Australia. This is, I don't know, my 4th or 5th visit since, I think it's about a decade that I've been visiting Australia. And I have had the most incredible food. And I've actually been following Australian cookery writers, like I've got Maggie Beer, and I've got Stephanie Alexander, and I've got a few Australian classics on my bookshelf. And I think what has happened here is very much mirrored in my journey, where it has evolved from a certain point into another point based on so many influences, both of good ingredients and immigration, and you see the same happening in California. So I think Australian cooking is marvelous, and I'm shocked every time I come to Sydney or to Melbourne or to any other big city. I haven't been to smaller places, and see how incredible the foods of the different immigrants is fused together. Incredible.
Yotam Ottolenghi, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. Simple by Yotam Ottolenghi is published by Penguin Random House and is available at goodreadingmagazine.com.au and all good bookstores. My name is Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening.